Have you ever walked into a forest and felt like it was alive, watching you? Tonight, you are going to follow Lena into a forest where shadows move, whispers follow you, and nothing is what it seems. Every step she takes pulls her deeper into a world where the trees breathe, the ground clings, and a dark presence waits for her. Will she escape, or will the forest claim her forever? Stay with us, and find out what lurks in the shadows of the Enchanted Forest. The evening light filtered through the treetops, falling on the golden-brown forest floor, covered with soft, damp moss. A gentle breeze carried strange whispers, making the hairs on Lena's arms rise without warning. The scent of wet earth touched her nose, mingling with a sweet, unusual aroma that should not exist in such a deep forest. Her footsteps froze. A branch snapped behind her, loud enough for her heartbeat to echo in her ears. She turned slowly, her breath coming in uneven bursts, as a dark shadow flickered across the ground, seeming to move closer. A chill ran down her spine, as the whisper grew louder, as if the speaker was just within arm's reach. Lena stepped backward, her toes pressing into something soft and damp, the sensation freezing her instantly. A faint, metallic scent rose along with the sticky feeling on her shoes. She bent down, seeing dark red fibers stretching across the ground beneath her feet. Before she could move, the sound of someone breathing came from right beside her ear, so close she could feel its warmth. Then the shadow moved again. Closer, and even closer. Lena's chest tightened, her heartbeat hammering so loudly it seemed to echo through the forest itself. The shadow did not reveal a face or form, just a shifting, almost liquid darkness that seemed alive. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet her feet felt glued to the mossy floor. She could feel the sticky fibers wrapping lightly around her ankles, like the forest itself was holding her in place. The wind picked up suddenly, carrying with it a low, mournful moan that seemed to come from the trees themselves. The branches overhead swayed violently, and some snapped under their own weight, raining down twigs and leaves around her. The sunlight was fading fast, leaving only slivers of orange and violet that barely illuminated the path ahead. Every shadow seemed to pulse and stretch unnaturally, creeping closer with every blink of her eyes. Lena forced herself to take a careful step backward, one trembling foot at a time. She tried to remember the path she had taken into the forest, but the trees all looked alike, twisted in shapes that seemed deliberately hostile. The air smelled thicker now, almost sweet but tinged with iron, like blood. Her skin crawled, and she felt a chill that was not from the evening air but from something inside the forest itself. A sudden rustle behind a cluster of ferns made her whirl around. The shadow had moved again, now only a few paces behind her. It seemed to mimic her movements, stretching and shrinking in rhythm with her heartbeat. Lena tried to shout, but her voice caught in her throat, leaving only a strangled gasp. The shadow's edges shimmered slightly, as if its very presence distorted reality. The moss beneath her feet pulsed faintly, and she realized with horror that the forest floor itself seemed to be breathing. The soft whispering returned, but now the words were indistinguishable, like fragments of memory from someone else's life. Her mind strained to comprehend the sounds, to make sense of the feelings they evoked: fear, longing, and something darker that churned in her gut. She wanted to scream, but again, no sound emerged. Panic clawed at her chest, her lungs tight as if invisible hands were squeezing her. Then the shadow lunged, not in a solid, physical sense, but more like a ripple of darkness racing toward her, curling around her legs. She stumbled backward, falling hard onto the damp ground. The sticky fibers clung tighter now, almost as if they were alive, wrapping around her hands and arms. Lena tried to pull herself up, her fingers snagging on the thick, dark strands, each movement slowing her down. The whispering rose into a chorus, overlapping in layers so dissonant it felt like her mind was being pressed from all sides. Her breath came in ragged gasps as the shadow approached. She caught a glimpse of something, just for a second, through the shimmer of darkness. A shape, human-like yet grotesque, with eyes that were voids, endless and empty, stared back at her. Its form flickered and fractured, as if reality itself could not contain it. The forest seemed to lean toward her, trees bending slightly in unnatural ways, roots stretching out like hands ready to drag her into the undergrowth. Lena scrambled to her feet, finally managing to break one leg free from the sticky tendrils. She ran blindly, branches lashing at her face and arms, tearing at her clothes and skin. The whispering followed, now urgent and demanding, like a tide threatening to swallow her whole. Every sound in the forest, the snapping twigs, the rustling leaves, the low moan of the wind, was magnified, echoing in a terrifying symphony of the unnatural. Her feet hit something soft and yielding. Looking down, she realized she had tripped over a mound of tangled roots. She fell forward, scraping her hands against the bark, leaving streaks of blood. As she struggled to rise, the air seemed to thicken around her, heavy and oppressive. The shadow hovered nearby, its form shifting as though observing, waiting. Lena felt a sudden surge of vertigo. The forest around her seemed to twist, the trees elongating into grotesque shapes, their branches reaching for her like claws. A cold, wet sensation brushed her neck. She flinched and spun around. The shadow was not where she expected. It was closer, hovering directly above her, a black ripple in the air that seemed to absorb the fading light. She could not see any features, but she felt it looking at her. Her stomach churned, and bile rose in her throat. She wanted to run again, but her body refused to obey. The whispering became intelligible, or perhaps her mind bent to understand it. Lena, Lena, you should not have come here. The voice was hollow, layered, and echoed in multiple pitches at once. Every word vibrated through her bones, and she realized the sound was not coming from outside her but from inside her skull. Shivering uncontrollably, Lena tore at the sticky fibers on her arms, and at the same time, the shadow undulated, expanding like ink in water. She stumbled backward, crashing into a tree, her shoulder hitting the trunk hard. Pain shot down her arm, but she barely noticed. All she could focus on was the oppressive presence of the shadow. The ground beneath her feet trembled slightly, and she heard faint, wet squelching sounds. Looking down, her stomach sank. The moss, once soft and green, had turned black and glossy, writhing faintly, like a living carpet of insects. The tendrils of shadow stretched toward her, meeting the writhing moss, and together they seemed to form a pulsating mass, alive with intention. Panic rose like a tide. Lena ran blindly, trying to follow the fading light of the sun through the thick canopy, but every direction seemed the same. Trees leaned inward, roots tripped her, and the forest seemed endless. And always, behind her, the shadow followed, silent except for the whispering, growing louder, more insistent, urging her forward into deeper darkness. She stumbled into a clearing. Moonlight, cold and pale, fell over a small pool of water at its center. Lena gasped for breath, her chest heaving. The water's surface rippled unnaturally, reflecting the forest in disarray. And in the reflection, she saw herself, or thought she did. Her reflection was wrong. Her eyes were too dark, her smile too sharp, and the shadow behind her was not behind her at all, but within the water, staring up at her with impossible stillness. Frozen, Lena reached out to touch the water. The surface pulsed under her fingertips like it was breathing. A sudden jolt of icy fear shot through her. The whispering became a scream. You cannot leave, you are part of the forest now. The fibers around her legs tightened again, pulling her toward the pool. Her hands clawed at the damp earth, at the roots, at anything to resist, but the pull was relentless. The shadow flowed toward the water as if leading her, guiding her into the center of the clearing. Every step felt heavier, as though the air itself was a weight pressing her down. Her mind raced. She needed to escape, but the forest seemed endless, the shadow patient, intelligent, unyielding. The whispering became laughter now, hollow, echoing, and cruel. It seemed to seep into her bones, into her thoughts, twisting memories into unfamiliar shapes. She wanted to scream, but no sound came. And just as she reached the edge of the pool, she felt it, a cold, wet hand, impossibly long and thin, wrap around her ankle. The fibers beneath her feet writhed violently, and the water in the pool churned, rippling toward her like a living, hungry thing. The shadow loomed over the surface, and in that moment, Lena realized with a sickening clarity that she was not just being watched, she was being claimed. The forest seemed to exhale around her, a wet, shivering sound that made her skin crawl. Her body tensed, her mind screamed, and in the reflection of the water, she saw it, herself, and yet not herself, grinning with empty eyes that promised she would never leave this place. And then the shadow surged. For a moment, everything seemed suspended. The shadow paused, hovering over the pool, its presence heavy and silent. Lena's heart thundered, and for the first time, she realized the forest was listening, waiting for her next move. She took a trembling breath, closing her eyes, and let herself sink into stillness. The whispers and the laughter faded slightly, as though her acceptance of her fear had given her a fragile calm. She opened her eyes slowly and looked at the pool again. The reflection stared back at her, dark, distorted, but she did not flinch this time. With careful steps, she reached toward the water, not to touch it but to acknowledge it. I am not yours, she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. The shadow shivered in response, as if struck by the sound of her words, and the moss beneath her feet loosened its grip. The pool's surface stilled, and for a brief, shining moment, the moonlight reflected the forest in its natural form, quiet, deep, alive but no longer threatening. Lena felt the oppressive weight of the forest lift slightly, though not entirely. The whispering receded into distant echoes, more like wind rustling through the leaves than voices. She turned slowly and began to walk back the way she remembered entering. Each step was careful, deliberate, but lighter than before. The forest still seemed alive, its eyes upon her, but she carried a new awareness, respect and caution, rather than pure terror. Branches no longer reached like claws, roots no longer clung. The shadow had retreated, dissolving into the edges of the clearing like mist in sunlight. The pool remained, quiet and deep, as if nothing had happened. Yet Lena knew better. She had touched the edge of something ancient and wild, and it had touched her in return. Finally, the forest opened up to the familiar path, the faint glow of her village just visible through the trees. Lena paused at the edge, looking back once. The shadows seemed smaller now, retreating into the trees. A shiver ran through her, but it was no longer fear, it was awe, respect, and a quiet understanding. She stepped onto the path, letting the forest fall behind her. Her heart still pounded, but with each step, a sense of relief grew, mingled with the memory of the whispering voices. Lena knew she had survived, not by outrunning the forest, but by facing it with courage, calm, and presence of mind. As she reached the edge of the village, the moonlight spilled across the fields, soft and reassuring. The enchanted forest remained behind her, mysterious and alive, but she carried a secret strength with her, a knowledge of the unknown, a brush with darkness that had not claimed her. And though she would never forget the shadow, the whispers, or the pool, she walked into the night with steady steps, leaving the forest to its own strange, eternal rhythm. The night was still, but Lena's heart had found a rhythm of its own. She had entered the forest afraid, but she emerged aware, alive, and forever changed. Dash dash dash.